Welcome to the Developing Life Podcast. Today, we live in a world that constantly asks us to go faster and do more. But for those of us who build things, who design, write, illustrate, lead, it's not just about output, it's about alignment. And today's guest is someone who spent a lifetime helping people realign with their creative truth. Dave Zaboski is a former Disney animator whose work includes The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, Fantasia 2000, Stuart Little, and more. But his journey goes far beyond the studio. He's painted for the Dalai Lama, led creative exhibitions across the Andes Mountains, co-founded a Silicon Valley startup designed to help artists thrive, and developed a deeply human system rooted in what he calls the universal laws of creativity, a framework designed to bring us back to what makes us feel alive. Today, with our host, Heather Crank, Dave will explore what it means to create with presence, how to reclaim your narrative when it's being shaped by pressure or productivity, and why, no matter where you are in your career or your journey, it is not too late to return to the imagination with purpose and joy.
Thank you, True. Beautiful intro. Welcome, Dave.
Wow, I'm delighted to be here. What a lovely intro. That's really sweet. Thank you.
True is the best.
She's amazing.
So True. So Dave, I met you, I think, my God, it's been a couple of years ago now. And I just really liked you. And then we've kind of interacted back and forth, and we've talked a lot about AI. And we're going to really dig into that today. But I would love to start talking about how you got into animation. And did this show up when you were a kid, or how did this whole thing start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that today I am a consummate creator, and it has to do with a little bit with the trajectory. I think I picked up a crayon when I was a kid, and I never put it down. I suppose I'll say, like, when I was in my 20s, I saw this book of Hokusai. Hokusai was the artist who, you might remember, did The Wave. He's a Japanese brush painting artist, right? Mount Fuji in the background and the boat in the middle, like Quicksilver used it for their logo. He said, and I sort of paraphrased this, I have done a universe of drawing in my life. And as I write this, I think he was something like, I'm 73 as I write this, but I only began to understand the form of things when I was 53. When I'm 83, I'll start to feel into what animals are like. When I'm 93, I'll understand humans. When I'm 103, he said, every dot, every line will jump to life as never before. And I challenge all of you to be witnesses to this. I'm no longer Hokusai. I'm the old man crazy about drawing. And so I think that that's really resonated with me. And that was before I was a professional artist, but I was just crazy about drawing. And so, I come from a big Jewish family in Los Angeles that says you can be anything you want in your life. And when I graduated from college, they were like, what kind of doctor or lawyer is that going to be? so I was kind of like, well, I'm pretty crazy about drawing. And so what about that? So I took the LSAT. I did pretty well on it. That's the law school application test. And then I applied to a bunch of law schools, but I wasn't quite sure what happens at law school. And so I got a job in a big law firm here in Los Angeles, and I hated every minute of it. And there was one moment when I was in my office on the 42nd floor in Century City when the Pink Floyd song, Wish You Were Here, comes on. So you think you can tell, heaven from hell, blue skies from rain, hot ashes from trees, hot air from a cool breeze. Did they get you to trade your walk-on part in the war for a lead role in a cage? And I heard that and I was like, oh shit. I am in a lead role in a cage, and I need to be in the I need to be in the place where the the fulcrum point is in my life, that place where the pencil meets the paper, the place where the creativity comes from the nothingness into reality. And so that's what I did. I went to Art Center College of Design. They had an internship offering from Disney Studios, and I applied to the internship offering. It was a sort of nationwide search. They went to these 50 schools in the country. They pulled 50 portfolios. They invited 12 to 15 young people to the studio for an internship, and they hired 2 or 3 of those. I applied 3 times. The first 2 times I was one of the top 50 portfolios, but I didn't get the internship. The third time I got the internship. And the reason that I did was because I talked to the recruiter, and he was like, well, your portfolio is beautiful, but what about your sketchbook? Do you ever use a sketchbook? And I was like, oh my God, I use a sketchbook all the time, but we were taught to like submit a perfect portfolio. And so I submitted my perfect portfolio, and then I dumped the 30 sketchbooks that I had done in the last year into the box, and I got the internship. And when I was there, in fact, I have sketchbooks all over my studio. I still am deeply in the practice of sketchbooks. It really is kind of my medicine. And while I was at Disney, Glenn Keane, the lead animator, did this. He had this lecture, and in the lecture, he said that the only limitation to animation is what you can dream. And that was it for me. Like, I felt like I had fallen in love. Like, this is what I'm going to do for my life. And so, there was a pretty competitive cohort of amazing artists who today are all masters. They've directed films. They're incredible. And so at the time, it was pretty competitive to get the internship. And so, I had to slit a few throats to get it. All right. That's a line from Aladdin, just in case anybody was wondering. I have never been convicted. So anyway, that's kind of the story. Once I started at Disney, I was just like, oh my God, this is it. The instructors at Disney, the artists at Disney were better than almost all of my instructors at Art Center, including some were instructors at Art Center. And so there was no question, this is what I'm going to do. And so I got the internship, and the first movie I got a chance to work on was Beauty and the Beast.
Oh my God.
And we knew after that we were up to something pretty exciting. And so I worked on Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Fantasia, Hercules, Tarzan, like all of these different. I went to Paris for a year and worked in Paris. It's like being an Oompa Loompa in the chocolate factory. So, it was an incredible training, and some of that stuff maybe we'll get a chance to talk about. I'd love to share some of the insights from that time, because I think that we really had systems and practices to create a master factory, and there's some pieces in there that True is talking about, these sort of universal laws of creativity that I think are applicable to not just creatives, but to anybody who wants to turn a thought into a thing.
Okay, so I'm going to combine 2 questions. On the idea of the universal laws of creativity, you also had an expedition for a lost temple in the Andes, I believe, for the Dalai Lama. Can we combine that the idea around creativity with your experience with the Dalai Lama?
Right. Actually, there's a conflation of a few things there. I was invited with a bunch of other artists to do some art for the Dalai Lama when he came into town. And so he came in with his entourage, and I ended up doing a portrait of his sand painting artist named Trungpa Rinpoche. And so he's passed away now. But there was a few of us artists who did a sort of gallery show for the Dalai Lama as he came through town. And then I had a chance to sit with the guy who does all the sand paintings, and he sat for me for a portrait. So that was pretty neat. That was an event. The other event was that I was asked to be the expedition artist on a search for a lost temple in the Andes. Mm-hmm. And when somebody asks you to be, I was a river guide through the Colorado River, through the Grand Canyon in my younger days. I'd done a lot of adventuring, and expedition art is a kind of particular niche of artists. And so I was qualified for this. It was a sort of pre-National Geographic expedition. And Uh, and the story goes is that in the Andes, the Apu, or the mountains, are the gods. And the gods have temples built to them. The second highest mountain in this range is called Salcante, and the temple that's built to it is the famous one that everybody knows. It's Machu Picchu. Now, the highest mountain is called Alzangate, and there's never been a temple found associated with that mountain. And the sort of pre-Columbian rumors were that it would be located in a place that had three monumental sculptures, basically, one of a snake, one of a condor, and one of a jaguar. And so in a previous expedition, one of our team members found in about 15 feet of water in a lake at 16,500 feet, I'm throwing a bunch of numbers, a 285 foot long zigzag snake in 15 feet of water made of stone.
Wow.
And so we were kind of like, holy cow, this could be where we might find the holy site. And so we put together a team of 19 people, scientists and photographers and drone operators. And this is in 2014, where the drones were actually gliders that we would send up because we were at 16,000 feet and there wasn't enough air pressure for propellered craft to be able to fly that high. And so, which became a problem later on when one of our divers had an accident and he perished. And so we had a pretty intense time. One of the divers died, and one of the divers had to come up from about 100 feet below the water, and he came up with the bends. And the other divers that were trying to rescue him, they got injured in the rescue because you're in icy glacial waters at 16,000 feet. And so we had to effect a rescue. And we were in what was called an altitude trap, meaning that we had to go to 17,000 feet to get down to the 16,500 foot level of where our base camp was. And so in order to get out of there, you had to climb over that pass to get down. And so 12 of us created a litter, and we carried the guy who had the bends on a litter over the 17,000 foot pass at about, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was 5 degrees out. And it was a pretty intense rescue. He's recovered and is diving again. And so that's pretty good. But we lost one of the members of our team. And so that's kind of a big deal. And so we never did find the temple. However, there was a moment when I was out there and I was sitting on these cairns. There are these three 3-foot high cairns. They had lichen at the bottom of them, indicating that they'd been there probably for 1,000 years. And when you have cairns, they're designed to sort of indicate a direction or something or other, right? And so I was sitting on one of these cairns one morning and I was like, I wonder what these are. These pointing at something? Why are these here? Because there wasn't any other structures around and they're clearly really old. And sitting on one of them, I thought, well, wonder where the sun rises on the solstice if I'm sitting here. And so there's 3 of them. So if you really line them up, these 2 can point that way and these 2 point that way. So I took these 2 and I pointed them. And you have these apps on your phone that are like star tracker apps, and you can see where the stars are in any particular time. So I dialed in the winter solstice, which in that part of the world is June 21st. And sure enough, this cairn pointed across this 11-mile lake to a horned mountain at the other side of the lake. And in between the horns on the solstice, from this spot, the sun rose right directly in between those. And so thus endeth the last clue of the mystery we never got a chance to check on. And boy, I'll tell you, it is hard up there. You're at 16,500 feet. You have chances of hypoxia and, altitude sickness. And it's like walking on the moon. It's hard to move. I'm 62 years old right now. And so I'm not sure I'm going to get back there to explore that spot. But I always wonder.
Wow. I'm speechless. Okay. So I'm
That doesn't
absorbing
have
all
anything to
that.
do that doesn't have anything to do with the universal laws of creativity, um, but there, there is a piece to that of kind of listening. When I was out there, I had a chance to do some portraits of these arrieros, the Sherpas of the Altiplano, of the high plains. These guys are made of stone. They're Inca descendants. They can run up there. They go, hey, Jose, go get the horses. And he'd go and run and get the horses. And you'd be like, how can you even run up here? They were really instrumental in the rescue as well. They're really extraordinary people. And they're very traditional. And I did a portrait of the chief of this group. And as I was doing it, and we had National Geographic cameras and reflectors, and the background was Alzangate, the snow-capped glacial mountain, and I mean, it was really beautiful. And the chief was getting irritated while drawing. I was doing this really lovely portrait of his face, and when I finished, he said, "Well, what about the vest?" Well, he had this beaded vest that he wore all the time, like he wore a Patagonia sweater that somebody had handed to him because of their Sherping, and then he had this beautiful beaded vest with thousands of tiny little beads that he wore over the top of it. It didn't keep him warm. It was decorative, and I didn't draw it. And what I realized was that he didn't care what he looked like. He wasn't about, hey, let's do a portrait of my face. What was important to him was this vest that he was wearing, that this was a rank, a thing that he had earned, a level of respect. This is what, in his world and in his mind, was portraitable, right? Not what he looked like. And so that's really where the creatives come in. A photographer may not have gotten that. A scientist certainly would have, but that's what our job as creatives is to listen to the sort of like langue des oiseaux, the language of the birds, for that thing that is not just what everybody thinks it's supposed to be. And that's where innovation lives, and that's where creativity lives, in that place where you're actually present to the world. And so when he got up, he was like, look at my vest. And I was like, oh my God, all right, hold that pose for a second. And then, I was an animator. So I just did this really quick pose of him like that and sort of scuffled that one up. And he was much more satisfied with that one.
Wow. Okay. So you've had all this amazing experience. You've traveled the world. You've experienced creativity in a lot of different forms. I'd love to hear about your experience with the Singular University. Can you speak to that? For those who are listening and don't know what that is, can you explain what that is?
Well, yeah, Singularity University was started by Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil, who is sort of the lead thinker at Google for a long time. And he talks a lot about the singularity and this idea that our track of technology and brain power is going to cross in a place where our capacity to calculate things using artificial means is going to be the same capacity that the brain is. And the brain has trillions of cells in a 10 to the billionth kind of capacity for calculation. And it's the idea that we'll be able to find this moment of singularity where our contrived contraptions have a kind of consciousness to them, right? They have enough data processing power that they will become ostensibly living beings, right? Or at least conscious beings. And so Singularity University was a place that technology and science and humans came together to talk about, like, how do we use these tools to enhance our capacity to support and help each other. And that was really a lovely, lovely idea. They still do a little bit of Singularity University things now. I'm not affiliated with that so much anymore. And, I've had a chance as a tech exec to go pretty deep on AI. And I'm not convinced that that's the potential future. I think that there's a couple things missing that, or at least as we say in the tech world, under-indexed in order for us to be able to rely on what they call agentic AI, or AI that becomes an agent. So it sort of crafts a suite of actions. Maybe I should, well, there's a couple paths that we can go, Heather. Tell me which way would you like to go? You want to kind of sort of move into that? You want to talk about the universal laws, or where would you like to go?
Ooh, can we combine the two?
We can, in fact. I think that that's probably the best. So the two combine in this way, and let me kind of thread this stuff for you, if that's all right. Okay. So the universal laws of creativity are the essentials necessary for us to cultivate a path to mastery in our creativity. And they are as thus. So the first is that we believe. I'm just going to run them down. Mm-hmm. We believe. Creators iterate. Creators collaborate. We risk, and we complete. So in belief, in each one of these sort of essentials, there are practices, and you definitely already have practices for all of these. When I heard about these, they were a way for me to kind of consolidate my practices so that I could point them all in the same direction, right? So belief, one of the best practices is story. Good storytelling helps people believe. Iteration, phasing up ideas. We have Agile, we have these other systems. Inside of the creative process, there's a little bit more subtlety to it and some structure that is things like committed but not attached, or something that we like to call confusion tolerance. Like when I'm iterating something, if I can have some confusion tolerance, then I can be like, hey man, I don't have all the answers right now. Like I'm just going to keep my powder dry until the world brings me enough so that I can trust a response. That's a really powerful discipline when we're iterating. Instead of trying to drag something out of the infinite potentiality, you sort of allow it to fall down into your lap by being tolerant of the state of confusion. And then there's collaboration. And in collaboration, we learn to be additive with each other. I'm going to circle back to collaboration because that's where we'll tie in and swing over to AI. The fourth one is risk. And risk is our ability to engender trust, because you have to risk. You have to make that mark. You have to push return on something. You have to take a risk. It's not like business risk where we want to mitigate risk or manage risk. It's like fucking risk. Like you have to take a chance on something. Like you have to lay down a stroke, or start a business or whatever, right? And so if you can find practices to engender trust, then you can start to manage how you risk and up your risk index. And it's also things like play, like learning how to play in ways that are low stakes but high learning. And then the last one is complete. The creatives complete. They finish strong, and there are practices for finishing strong. And then once you finish strong, what you've done is you're able to tell a story that hooks you back in and closes the circuit on these 5 things and takes you back to belief. Once I finish strong, whatever that finish is, that finish may not have been a success, but if there are a ton of learnings from it, then it's still finishing strong. And that allows me to cycle back around and tell a more powerful story. And then you run through the rest of these. In collaboration, here's the thing about collaboration, and it is in our blood. Like we are collaborative entities. The Homo sapiens, there's a really good chance, if you read Yuval Harari and other historians, that one of our greatest survival gifts was our ability to collaborate, to be able to join forces together. The Neanderthals and the other Homo species might have had bigger brains and larger bodies and stronger, but they weren't able to collaborate the way Homo sapiens were. And so, if you think about it, the mitochondria, if you remember your high school biology, is the powerhouse of the cell, right? And it lives inside of the cell and allows the cell to differentiate, to live longer, and to, it gives it its juice. Well, the mitochondria has a different shaped DNA than the cell itself does, meaning that they probably were separate at some point. And so even at the cellular level, we are symbiotic, we are collaborative. And so collaborative is in our blood. It's the thing that makes the difference for humans, and this caused all of our success. powerful collaboration is not just being additive to each other. It has to have these three pillars. And this comes from a philosopher called Forrest Landry, who is really just brilliant and has these triads that I feel have really healed my ability to collaborate, and my failures in collaboration, as I am not with the tech company that I co-founded 5 years ago. So he talks about these three pillars, that you have to have power, transaction, and care. And so if we sort of neutralize these and you think about, well, what's power? Power is simply the mojo that you've collected. It's your skill set, your talents, your abilities, your experience. It's the sort of hierarchy or the place that you've arrived at in the efforts that you've made to collect your mojo, for lack of a better word, like skills, abilities, talents, capacities, right? Transaction is the interaction of powers. How do these powers transact with each other in order to accomplish the things that each one says that they want to accomplish? And so that transaction is that sort of fluid interdependence, interchange between them. And then there's care. And care is, I think, under-indexed in our time. Care is, defined by, yes, whatever you want to define it by. It is just as subtle, structural, nuanced, important, magnificent as power and transaction is. And it is part of a triad that holds up collaboration. And if you think about it, if you can take care out of it, what is power without care? It's pretty quickly abuse, right? And what is transaction without care? And it's pretty quickly manipulation, right? Like my transaction with you is I win, you lose. It's a zero-sum game. That's a transaction without care. Now, the opposite of that is power with care. Power with care is like mentorship that's just fantastic. It's just like, hey, my candle will not put your candle out if I light you up, right? And so here's a thing that I've learned that I think would be super beneficial to the stuff you're up to because I care, right? So power with care is a kind of mentorship that, man, it is so exciting. I saw this directly at Disney. We were not competing with the artists that we worked with. We were kind of competing with those guys who came before us. So like, holy cow, I'm working on a movie. It has to be as good as Jungle Book. Damn, right? Like, how am I going to do that? Right? And the only way to do that is to empower mentorship and to have careful transactions, right? So transactions with care are mentorship and collaboration. We were saying at Disney, like the fastest accelerant to greatness was generous collaboration. And that's transaction with care, right? Like you care about the abilities of the other people. When they rise, you rise. That's freaking awesome, right? Like there was a scene that I was working on at Disney with John Smith where he was going, so, it's kind of like this, right? Well, I mean, this hand, it's the most miraculous tool in the known universe, right? Like it's incredibly complicated and dexterous and beautiful and elegant, and making it go like this 24 frames a second is super tricky, right? And so Ken Duncan, who runs Duncan Studios, an amazing animator, came up to me and he goes, hey, I saw that shot that you did. Do you mind if I show you what one of the 9 old men showed me about drawing hands, right? And you're just like, oh my God, yes, please, right? Like that kind of generosity is daily. And that's when masters are polishing masters, when you have transaction, power, and care in this triad. Now, does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that.
Right? So here's where this dovetails into AI. One of the challenges we face is that it is not artificial intelligence. It's a machine learning. And there's a professor at, I think, Berkeley named Alison Gopnik, Professor Gopnik. She just wrote a paper in March that I think is really interesting about the how she contextualizes this new technology. And I think that artificial intelligence is a tech bro hype term that doesn't describe it, but it's used to sell it. because it's not an intelligence. I mean, we're super clear. It is not an intelligence. But Professor Gopnik talks about it in terms of a social cultural technology. And that I really like. And so here's the difference. A social cultural technology is a technological tool that we have around us. A library is a cultural technology, right? We've accumulated all of this data in one place. She asked the question, who knows more, the Library of Congress or me? What do you think? Who knows more, the Library of Congress or me?
That's a good. They know different things.
Well, the Library of Congress doesn't really know anything. It has a lot of information there. I'm the one who knows something. I know it's a trick question. Freaking professors. They do that sort of thing. Right? That's what professors like to do, that kind of thing.
They do.
The Library of Congress doesn't per se know anything. I'm the one who knows it. That's where I can access it. And I think that this is the same thing, right? This machine learning tool. And so let me thread a couple of other things together for you.
Okay.
There have been kind of three phases to this advanced machine learning thing that's happening in our technology. And we are in a super exciting time. And I got to tell you, I am absolutely conflicted by it. These three phases are, the first was kind of reinforcement learning, right? So you teach this thing, and this goes back to the 70s and 80s. Once you had a calculatable thing, you would reinforce its learning, and then it would get better by reinforced learning, meaning iterations allowed for it to learn more perturbations, and then it could make choices based on that. And that's why it's so good at chess and Go, because those things have limited rules that allow for it to play more games than any grandmaster could have ever played in their life. And then it learns from that, and then it can apply those learnings because every thing that it's seen before, right? And so what we thought would be really hard is chess, and it turns out it's not that hard. What's super hard is if you ask a machine to move the chess piece in between the four squares right here and set it down right there. Like, that is really tricky. A freaking 4-year-old can do that, but a grandmaster chess machine can't, right? So you can't ask it to do things. You can't say to it, hey, today all of the pawns get to move wherever they want. If you're playing a game with a 10-year-old who knew chess and you told them that, they would beat the machine every time, because suddenly they have this innovative capacity that is so far beyond the machine's ability to learn through reinforcement that it's just off the charts, right? So that was the first phase, is reinforcement learning. The second phase is that we digitized everything. And this happened around 2000 or so, is that we took all of the data that we had that was written and scribbled on things, and we digitized it. So now it's indexable. And so once it's indexable, then you have it at your fingertips, the totality of Western civilization's digitized information. Now, there's some biases in that. So like, if you're above the equator and you have mostly light skin, it's going to super work for you, right? But it does have some drawbacks, and there are limitations on its learning because it's indexed on particular things. You might get a lot more Asian faces in it than you want, because there's a lot of those being trained on for those populations, which outnumber other populations, right? And if you're dark skinned, you might get a lot less, right? And so you have to understand its limitations. But that was the second phase. Everything got digitized. Now, the third phase is what we're in right now, which is what they're calling agentic AI. This idea that instead of asking it to go do one task and find one indexed piece of information, you're saying, can you take whatever you find there, pair it with this one, and this one, and do a suite of tasks for me such that I don't have to do that. These are called automations now, right? And so you can have it do multiple tasks in a row to automate those things that it's pulling off the internet that have been digitized, right? And so that's pretty exciting that we can kind of use it to automate the things that are going on. And this is where this hooks back into power, transaction, and care. It's that the computer doesn't care. This machine learning thing is not an intelligence. It has been made to look that way by OpenAI and these guys so that when you prompt something, it says, oh my God, Heather, that's such a great question. And have you done something with your hair today? And that must be a new lipstick because you look so shiny, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like it's so fucking cordial, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a tuning that's put in there by the programmers because it's a service that they want you to come back to, right? And so we as humans have a pretty short fuse on anthropomorphizing things, right? Like we do that with our dogs. We do that, you know, like I can go, we anthropomorphize things all the time. No, we don't, Dave. Yes, we do. You know, it's like all you have to do is turn your hand into a sock puppet, and now it's a, you know, it's a another entity, right? So, where does care come in? Care comes in with people, and so this is where I actually think things with artificial intelligence get super exciting, and so let me add a couple more elements. Is this okay? Are we on?
Yeah.
Are we tracking
We're
stuff?
good. We're good.
All right. All right. So let me throw down a couple other pieces to this. There are basically three aspects to the machine learning technology that we're in, and basically they call it machine learning instead of large language models because now we have what's called multimodal models, which are you know, words and pictures and potentially even music. But really, we're just calling them language models, or we're calling them machine learning or things like that. So anyway, with machine learning, there are three aspects to it. There's music, words, and pictures, right? And so music, I don't do a lot in the world of music. My friend Harry Pickens does, and he's got some really exciting ideas, some that I'll share here in a minute, about how to use AI to turn it into a thinking machine. With music, there's systems already for provenance and sampling and rights attribution and stuff like that, and I don't know that much about that one. With words, I think it's possibly a miracle. Like we have access to all of this incredible information if we know how to use it right. With pictures, at this time, for where I am in my career, I feel that it's not yet ethical. And I know that, Heather, you do beautiful work. You're a graphic designer, so you come at it from a really different place. Like you come at it from a professional graphic design background where you really have used this as a tool to create results that are extraordinary, and I love your work. And there are very few people like you whose use cases I think are as close to the line of ethical as possible, but most of them, for me, are submerged below the line of ethical when it comes to artwork. It was one of the things that caused me to leave my former company because I just felt that they were becoming too extractive and not considering the culture of creatives that we had been cultivating. And so I just, you know, that was not for me anymore. So now with words, here's the thing. If you're a young person and you are not using this tool to connect to your soul's purpose, then there's room for improvement on using this. And so this is what Harry Pickens talks about, is creating a thinking partner out of it. Now, typically we use AI as a glorified Google. Can you answer me these questions? And the way I like to think about it, and this is what excites me about it, is imagine that there's this line. And this line is, above the line is wisdom, and below the line is knowledge and information. And in our time, we've over-indexed on knowledge and information, and we've under-indexed on wisdom. We can agree to that, right? Like we are missing some wisdom out there. But this tool can actually connect us to our own wisdom. And it's a thing where we can, what Harry Pickens calls making a thinking partner out of this tool. And that is figuring out, if you're looking for wisdom, then you figure out how to get it to ask you questions. If you're looking for knowledge, then you ask it questions. It's as simple as that. If I want to know more about like What interests me? How can I live my life more beautifully? How can I connect more deeply to the things that interest me? Here's what interests me. Can you ask me some questions to clarify a trajectory for me, or to clarify those things that interest me? Can you turn the computer into Socrates? And so this is a thing that I'm calling Socratic prompting, right? Like, can you ask me some questions to help me clarify my vision? Man, it's going to be great at that. So then it's going to ask you some questions. But here's the thing that I think is the thing that I think takes it to the next level, that makes me really excited about it, is now that you have it ask you some questions and you answer some questions, and you can even ask it, hey, ask me a question I haven't asked before. But then you take that sort of suite of questions and you have it do it one at a time. The end of your prompt says, please ask me one question at a time and wait for my answer before you go to the next question. And so you can kind of let it pace you out a little bit. And then once you have all those down, you get it to a place where you're like, all right, those are pretty good questions. Then you take that to a human, because humans ask better questions than a computer ever will, because they understand how to make sense of something, right? The computer is only predictive, and it does not care. It doesn't have care as part of its system. And so knowing that, all of the questions that it's going to ask you are going to be predictive questions, no matter how good and how cordial and friendly the thing is. Those questions are only going to be predictive questions. Some of them might be pretty good, but nothing like what a human can ask you if they care about what you're up to. So you find somebody who's going to care about what you're up to, and then you learn to create a Socratic dialogue with them. Like, a Socratic dialogue is a dialogue where you ask questions, and those questions let you go deeper and deeper and deeper into who you truly say you are. And so Socrates, 2,000 years ago, complained about writing. He said, like, hey, man, if y'all write this shit down, then nobody gets to ask anybody questions, and you can just go to a papyrus and flip it open and get the answer. It's bullshit. That's exactly what Socrates said. We actually have that on a permit. So now here we are 2,000 years later. We actually have the opportunity to make Socrates real for us again, to learn how to pull our own wisdom out of ourselves using this 2,000-year-old practice that Socrates had, that we could use this thing as a thinking partner that helps us figure out who we want to be in the world. And so just kind of to complete that, right? So let's just say, like, now I go, oh, you know what? I want to be a landscape architect, and I love Colorado Springs. And so then now you go below the line and you go, okay, cool, chat. Who are the landscape architects in Colorado Springs? Here's the 4 landscape architects. What are their niches? What do they do? What niche are they missing? What niche could I do to fulfill on that? Can you write me an ad that can go in a newspaper? What newspapers are available for me to put an ad in there? How much are they? When should I post them? Right? Like, all of the things that you want to kind of Googleize the Chat GPT, you can now, because you have clarity of vision. And research has shown that if you, like, they did this test where these students did these essays, and they first just had Chat make the essay. The second one was they took they sort of wrote the essay and they had Chat edit it. And then there was one where they just wrote it themselves, right? The ones who wrote it and then had some help editing it made the most, they had their, I think they were even scanning their brain with a fMRI at the time, like functional, see brainwaves. Those guys were the most active. The one that just said, hey, Chad, give me the answer, their skills diminished. And this is the reason that I'm so excited about this, and why I worry, is that if we don't have human care coming into this interaction, then our skills will get diminished, and we will use this as a crutch instead of as wings. And that's the fork in the road that's possible for us.
Wow. I'm going to use this moment to say we are just about at the 45-minute mark. If you have questions for Dave, you can put them in the chat. At this point, you're also welcome to turn on your camera if you would like to ask him a question directly. Dave, I am so grateful for this talk. You've given us so many insights and so much to think about. Let me check. I'm going to check for questions. I see none. I think you've given us a lot of information.
Did I
So
did I blow some brains up here?
I think you blew some brains up for sure.
Well, I'm super excited about this because this is the way forward, and there are people who are using this, and there's room for improvement. And I think this is the room for improvement. And people are scared of chat or worried about it, or they think it's dangerous. And there are some truths to all of that. But we're the ones who tell the story. When we use it correctly to fulfill our soul's purpose, oh my God, you think that there's going to be people following you on that? There's all these people who are getting laid off right now.
Yeah.
You can use this tool back at it. You got laid off because of AI. All right. F AI. AI help me find my soul's purpose so I can get back on the horse, right? The very tool can cut both ways. And that's the thing that's super exciting to me. And that's why I'm kind of lit up about it. And sorry if I'm, freaking y'all out, but this is a way forward to me. So
this is so helpful. You have no idea. I've had some of the same internal conflicts and dialogues myself. I see this as an incredibly powerful tool. It really helps me as a contractor in small studio be able to compete. And as this market is tightening, as you know, because so many people are being laid off and there's so much chaos going on, it would be a mistake for me not to use it. But there are ethical issues. And this is a dialogue. You and I actually had this dialogue quite a bit. And I really love the idea of knowledge versus wisdom. I think that is so incredibly important.
Right. All right. Are there any questions?
So I've got one. Davron says, if you don't control the narrative, the narrative controls you. What does that look like on a personal level? And how have you taken back authorship of your own story?
Right. Well, you have to figure out what your story is. And there are ways to connect to your story. And here's a really simple way to connect to what story do you want to tell with your life in the world. I've done a bunch of work in marketing, and marketing always talks about mission, vision, values, and then it becomes somebody else's story. How to find your story is to really find what your character is. What role are you playing in this kindred quest that we're involved in? And so figuring out what your role allows you to really be able to get control of the story that you say you're telling with your life. And it kind of goes a little like this, right? Like if you think about it, no character in any story that you see ever thinks that they're being acted by an actor, right? They're acting from the inside out. So when I create stories and I create characters, I'm actually creating the character first. I'm working on this exact thing right now, and it's part of the confusion tolerance. I'm doing a graphic novel with Forrest Landry's philosophies. And at this point in the storyboarding of it, I'm just drawing what they're doing. Oh, this guy wants to go over there. Well, let's follow him over there and see what he does, because I know what the characters are made of. And so characters are made of an archetype, which is sort of their sort of category that they live into, their values, what they believe is important, and their principles. Principles are a kind of algorithm that keep values in place. So an archetype is, I sort of like the artist wizard. Like when I do my talks, that's the archetype I go to. I go, all right, God, I'm feeling shitty today, but you know what? For this thing today, I am the artist wizard, because that's the role I'm going to play, right? And so that archetype that has a culturally imbued information in it. And so whatever archetype you pick, baker, race car driver, whatever it is, combination, race car baker, there's these guys who actually like make food that they wrap in tinfoil, they put it on their motors, and they drive a certain time and they cook their food, right? All right. Wow. So that's whatever, right? So whatever your archetype is, That's a whole nother topic. Whatever your archetype is, that archetype has culturally imbued wisdom in it. It's a cheat sheet. So if you say, this is the archetype I'm going to play, and you don't have to play it all of the time. Like part of the time I'm a dad, part of the time I'm a husband, part of the time I'm a caretaker or a dog or a goat owner, right? So what I'm a goat herd at some point in my day. That is actually true. So, so whatever the archetype you choose to play in the moment, and then that archetype has things that are important to it. Those are the values, 3 to 5 values: love, community, kindness, duplicity, whatever the value is. Like there are people who have all of these values, and then they have principles that keep those values in place. And so a principle is basically an algorithm or a rule set that holds a value in place. So if I say that kindness is one of my values, but what do I do with it? One of my values is kindness. I believe in kindness, but that is just like a state. How do I make a choice? If I just believe in kindness, that's not quite enough. But if I have this rule that says be kind, well, then now every act I take is filtered by the rules that I have. If the other one is community and I say like all for one and one for all, then that's also a filter for it, right? If then I say show up and follow through is one of mine for diligence, right? Mm-hmm. Then I show up and follow through. So I have these rule sets that allow me, and they're not like hard and fast, and there's, hierarchies to them, but they're ways that I look at the world that allow me to make choices that are based on what I believe is important to me. And so when I make choices for the things that I believe are important to me, then my actions are an expression of those important things in my life. And my story will unfold based on the actions that I take as an expression of what's important to me. And that's how I regain control of my story.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. We've got one more question for you, and then we'll be close to our time. I've got a question from Milka, and Milka is asking, what are some other goals in your life? And Devron is tagging on to that, saying, to further Milka's question, who are you as the maker at this stage in your journey?
Oh, wow. Who am I as the maker in this stage? Well, I'm a master at what I do, and to step into that has some responsibility, not from an ego standpoint, but from like a commitment standpoint, right? Like I never put my pencil down. I'm in the waiting room at the doctor's office drawing people, right? So like that level of devotion. So for me, there's a suite of skill building, and it starts with discovery. You pick up a flute or a pencil and you start messing around with it, and then you think, oh shoot, I might be able to make practice out of this. And then you make a practice out of it and you start a discipline, and you take that discipline. And most métiers, most jobs in the world, they only ever get to discipline. Their job is a discipline. They work there for 40 years, they get a gold watch, they retire and take a cruise and die, and that's all they get is discipline. In the world of art, and you could apply this to any other profession if you chose, but it's more obvious in my profession, is that the sort of third stage is devotion. So you have discovery, discipline, and then devotion. And that's the space that I'm in right now. I'm in this place where my work is my devotion. My medicine is my sketchbook. And so that feels really good to me. And in that space, I allow myself to be guided to places where I am valued for living in that space. It's also one of the reasons that I left the tech world, is that they didn't value that part of what I could contribute to the company or the world. Mm-hmm. And so it feels really good to step into that space, to live in a life of devotion. And what I want to create, the next thing that I would love to do is I would like to be the expedition artist on a search for Atlantis.
Oh.
Yeah. So Yeah.
Wow.
So,
That would be cool.
I mean, come on, right? So, so yeah, that's the kind of dream there. So I don't know, it's just out there, but whoever's looking for it better be an artist of devotion. So,
Mhm.
so I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And we are just about at time right now. So I'll open up one last time to see if anyone else has any other questions. Okay, I think we're good. Dave, oh my gosh, it's so good to catch up.
In fact, if they want to contact me, you can email me if that's all right. You mind if I check that out there?
Yes, please.
You can email me at dave@creativelyspeaking.live. So that's my new company. And I'm happy to answer any emails, dave@creativelyspeaking.live. And then I've got some stuff on Instagram. I've been a little quiet, but I'm about to pop that one open again. At Dave Z Art, DaveZart, at Dave Z Art. That's my Instagram. So.
And do you have anything else coming online soon that you'd like to announce, or?
I got a bunch of really fun projects. Just stay tuned. Yeah, they're all some neat stuff. I'm doing an ad for a short film for Wacom tablets right now. It's going to be pretty cool. So.
How cool. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I'm so grateful for your time. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today. And for everyone who's tuning in, make sure you check out Dave's site and his Instagram. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Developing Life podcast, and have a great day.